She said she loved you. She said you were her everything. That she had never felt this kind of connection before. That you were special. That she finally felt seen. But now, she's gone. Not just physically. She's emotionally unavailable, cold, distant. And the worst part? She acts like you're the problem. You replay every moment, every word, every look. You wonder if you were too intense, too emotional, too much. You keep asking yourself, if she loved me, why did it feel like I was always walking on glass? Carl Jung wouldn't have told you it was love. He would have told you it was control. Not necessarily conscious, not malicious in the obvious sense, but psychological control, rooted in shadow, trauma, and projection. Because some people don't love you. They study you. They read your wounds like open books, mirror your soul like a perfect reflection, and then use your deepest hunger for connection against you. They didn't love you. They loved your vulnerability. They loved the way you made them feel powerful. They loved that you handed them access to your emotions, your mind, your heart, without hesitation. And Jung knew exactly why. Because your unconscious was choosing them, not your heart. The truth is brutal. If you haven't made your unconscious conscious, it will keep choosing people who trigger the very abandonment, betrayal, or neglect you never healed. This isn't coincidence. This is compulsion. Jung called it the shadow, the repressed self, the denied emotions, the childhood wounds, the unprocessed pain, all buried deep inside your psyche, yet pulling the strings without you even knowing. And when a person enters your life who subconsciously reflects your unresolved pain, you don't resist them. You get addicted to them. Not because they're safe, but because they feel familiar. You mistake the emotional instability for passion. You mistake their silence for mystery. You mistake their hot and cold behavior for depth. But it's not love. It's control. Emotional, psychological, soul-level manipulation. And here's what makes it worse. They didn't even have to try that hard, because your own shadow already set the stage. They just stepped into the role. They love-bombed you, mirrored you, told you everything you wanted to hear. They gave you just enough attention to get you hooked, then pulled back just enough to make you chase. They created an emotional hunger inside you so intense, you started mistaking your own anxiety for desire. And Jung would say, this is the price of unexamined wounds, because the person who needs to be loved, who feels incomplete without emotional attention, who equates intensity with intimacy, will always be vulnerable to manipulation, especially from someone who knows how to mirror love, but isn't capable of giving it. And the worst part? You knew something was off from the very beginning. It was the way you felt after the calls, the way they twisted your words, the way they made you feel guilty for your needs, the way they punished you with silence when you expressed your truth. You felt it in your gut, but your trauma told you to stay. Your shadow told you to fix it. Your inner child told you maybe this time you'll finally be chosen. But Jung would ask you one thing. Why are you so desperate to be chosen by someone who hurts you? And the answer? Because you haven't chosen yourself yet. You still think love is something to earn, something to prove, something that lives in someone else's approval. And that belief, it makes you a perfect target. Jung warned, until you integrate your shadow, it will dominate your relationships. You will project. You will attract people who play out your worst fears. And you will call it fate. But it's not fate. It's a mirror. One you've been refusing to look into. And this person, the one who claimed to love you, but made you feel smaller with every conversation, they didn't want connection. They wanted control. And you gave it to them. You gave them access to your insecurities. You made them your emotional home. You allowed them to define your worth. That's not on them. That's on the part of you that believes of must be painful to be real. But here's where everything shifts. What if it was never love? What if it was need, masked as intimacy? What if it was validation addiction? What if it was your trauma trying to finish a story that was never meant to continue? And what if, just what if, the pain you're in right now isn't proof that you lost something sacred, but proof that you're finally waking up? Because this isn't about getting them back. This isn't about revenge. This is about reclaiming the parts of you that allowed this to happen in the first place, the parts that still confuse chaos for love, the parts that want to be seen so badly. They hand their soul to anyone who smiles. Jung didn't offer comfort. Now, the part of you awakening that's aching. That's your real self screaming to be chosen. Not by them, by you. Because until you do, you'll keep falling for people who say, I love you. When what they really mean is, I love the power you give me. You keep telling yourself they cared. You keep clinging to the good moments, the softness, the connection, the memories. But somewhere deep inside, you know something doesn't add up. Because if they truly loved you, why did you constantly feel anxious, small, and unseen? Why did you question your reality every time you expressed your feelings? Why did I love you come with silent conditions? Carl Jung would tell you this. They didn't love you. They needed to control the version of you that made them feel safe. And the worst part? You mistook that control for love, because no one ever taught you the difference. Jung believed we all carry two lives, the one we live and the one that lives us. The second one, the unconscious life, is where all your unhealed wounds reside. It's where your fear of abandonment lives, your guilt, your need to be enough, your craving to be needed. And when you meet someone who touches those wounds just right, it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels magnetic. But what you're really feeling is your own shadow waking up. Not the evil part of you, not the villain, but the exiled part, the younger self who was never chosen, the version of you that decided long ago, if I can be perfect enough, they won't leave. And that version becomes desperate, not for connection, but for control. Control of someone else's love, someone else's presence, someone else's attention. But here's the paradox. While you're trying to control love, they're trying to control you. And this is where Jung's brilliance cuts through the illusion. You weren't in a relationship. You were in a mutual power game. You gave away your boundaries to be loved. They withheld affection to maintain control. You opened up too fast. They mirrored your soul back to you, then pulled away. You needed validation. They needed dominance. And neither of you were aware it was happening. Because this dynamic doesn't play out on the surface. It lives in the subconscious, in body language, in timing, in silence, in small acts that slowly condition your nervous system to earn love rather than receive it. This is why you kept trying harder, why you apologized even when you didn't do anything wrong, why you justified their coldness, why you thought you were the reason things felt unstable. But you weren't the problem. The real issue was the power imbalance beneath the illusion of intimacy. Carl Jung saw this in thousands of patients, people who didn't understand why they were addicted to someone who made them feel invisible, people who couldn't leave even though they knew they were shrinking, people who called abuse passion and silence mystery. He understood that this isn't weakness, it's unconscious repetition. Repetition of childhood dynamics, repetition of betrayal, repetition of chasing emotionally unavailable people in hopes that this time you'll finally be seen. But here's the dangerous truth. Some people feel powerful only when you're in pain, and they won't say that out loud. They won't admit they crave control. They'll call it love. They'll say things like, "I just need space." "You're too emotional." "I never said that." "You're overthinking again." But Jung would call it by its real name: gaslighting, projection, emotional possession. And if you don't know who you are, if you haven't integrated your own shadow, you'll accept it. You'll start believing their version of reality. You'll start doubting your intuition. You'll betray yourself again and again just to stay close to someone who is slowly erasing you. And the tragedy? You'll think you're doing it in the name of love. But Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And in this case, you sacrificed your soul to avoid facing one brutal truth. They never loved you. They loved the power you gave them. And you loved the illusion. You loved the fantasy of being seen. You loved how complete they made you feel before they flipped the switch. You loved the high of closeness, even though it came with a devastating low. This isn't love. It's emotional dependency. It's a relationship built on control, not connection. And that control doesn't always look like aggression. Sometimes it's subtle, refined, disguised as caring. They ask where you are, but not out of love, out of insecurity. They get upset when you set boundaries, because boundaries weaken their grip. They withdraw affection when you speak your truth, because control is more important than understanding. And the more you try to fix it, the more they pull away. You've spent enough nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what you did wrong. You've apologized for emotions that weren't wrong. You've made excuses for treatment that wasn't love. You've silenced your voice just to avoid being abandoned. And Carl Jung would say, it's time to stop. It's time to reclaim yourself. It's time to break free. But freedom doesn't begin with forgetting them. It begins with remembering you, not the version of you that performed to be loved, not the mask you wore to keep the peace, but the real you, the one who got buried underneath their control, their silence, their emotional manipulation. You don't need closure from them. You need to close the gap between the person you became for them and the person you truly are. Jung believed healing wasn't about going back. It was about integration, pulling all the exiled parts of yourself back into the light. So how do you do that? How do you walk away from something that once felt like everything? You begin with this truth. It wasn't love. It was survival. And now, You're choosing to live. Step 1 is to stop justifying what hurt you. Stop romanticizing pain. Stop calling withdrawal space. Stop calling the confusion chemistry. Stop calling the control passion. Because every time you rewrite their manipulation as meaning, you betray yourself. You don't heal by pretending it wasn't that bad. You heal by telling the truth, even when it burns. Jung would call this shadow confrontation, looking directly at what you've tried to avoid. It sounds like this. I let myself be controlled because I didn't believe I was enough on my own. I ignored the red flags because I was addicted to being chosen. I stayed because I thought love meant sacrifice, even if it meant losing myself. And once that truth hits, you stop reaching for them. You stop checking if they watched your story. You stop fantasizing about the apology that's never coming. Because you don't want them back. You want your power back. And that's what this entire journey is about. Taking your power back from the illusion that someone else's approval defines your worth. They never gave you love. You gave them your soul. And now, you're taking it back. But don't expect this to be easy. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." When you finally walk away from someone who used control to masquerade as love, you'll feel empty. You'll feel disoriented. You'll question everything. But that emptiness isn't proof of your brokenness. It's proof that you've finally stopped lying to yourself. You're not being punished. You're being purified. The space they once filled with chaos, it's clearing. And what fills it next is your choice. So what do you do with that space? You rebuild your inner authority. You start small. You ask, what do I really want? Outside of performance, outside of pleasing. You say no when your gut says no. You walk away when the energy feels wrong. You stop over-explaining your worth. And as that new you emerges, you become dangerous. Not because you hurt others, but because you can no longer be used. And suddenly, the breadcrumbing doesn't excite you. The hot and cold attention doesn't pull you in. The games don't confuse you. They bore you. Because you've tasted your own wholeness. And once you have, you'd rather be alone with your truth than in a relationship that demands your silence. This is what Jung meant by individuation. Becoming who you were before the world told you to be someone else. Before someone disguised as a lover made you shrink for affection. Individuation is not about isolation. It's about sovereignty. It's about walking into any room, any relationship, knowing that love is not something to be earned by disappearing. Because now you've seen the game. You've seen how some people need to control others to avoid confronting themselves. You've seen how manipulation hides in pretty words. You've seen how love can be weaponized by the emotionally wounded. But you've also seen this. You survived. You didn't stay down. You didn't let them define you. You didn't become bitter. You became aware. And that awareness, that's everything. Because now, the next time someone enters your life, you don't ask, do they love me? You ask, does this feel safe to my soul? You ask, can I be fully seen and still stay whole? Because love that demands your silence is not love. Love that requires shrinking is not love. Love that hurts more than it heals is not love. It's control. It's projection. It's fear. And you? You're done playing small to keep someone else comfortable. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And now, that's your path. No more performing. No more proving. No more giving your power to people who only knew how to possess, not love. You are no longer theirs to confuse. You are no longer theirs to mold. You belong to yourself. Finally,